this computer. All right. I'm gonna back up
Gotcha.
in reference to just hit the high points of what we talked about. We were talking about Alexander invading that of Persia and how that he had crossed over in 334 BC and invaded and conquered Persia. Then a close fight ensues between Alexander's army and Darius's the third at the river of Granicus or at Grand Icum, and Alexander won that battle. And then we also talked about the Egyptians welcomed Alexander as a deliverer. And so that brings us down to point C on our outline, that it's some unique contributions of Alexander the Great, and consist of the following. And so I got to remove my color. If I don't, then we'll be coming back here next week. Well, I didn't didn't get rid of it. What did I do? I'm doing the wrong thing. All right, Bobby, straighten up. All right, there it goes. Okay. Alexander encouraged the merging of society, and we talked about a little of this last week when we were closing, both socially and commercially. So he saw the great need to merge those, and how that it would help the society, and also how that it would help the commerce. He encouraged intermarriage with the Persians. That's a mixture of their cultures, and so what he was trying to do is to diffuse Grecian culture and religion and philosophy among that of the conquered peoples. And so diffused the Greek language among the nations that it became nigh the I think that ought to be high instead of nigh. High, universal language. I get right. Not high, high universal language. I'm gonna put a mark there, so I'll look that up. Universal language, but this is contribution. And again, we have to bring up that God had an eternal plan, Ephesians 3, 9, and 10, 11. And everything had to be in order so that the gospel could be carried to the whole world when Jesus came. And especially when he died and was resurrected and ascended back unto heaven. Then the Holy Spirit came and guided the apostles into all truth. Everything had to be ready. And so this is one of those contributions that was made to facilitate the spread of Christianity some 3 centuries later. And so that's the reason why we stop sometimes, and we ought to think these people are not Christians, but yet they help in the sense that Alexander did, that he gave one universal language. That's what he was trying to do. And so again, like I said, this is 300 BC. So we're talking about 3 centuries before Christ comes. Alexander died at an early age of 37, and the history is I kind of want to find this book that I've mentioned, and I'm gonna have to look it up. It's called in History's History of the World, or in Historian's History of the World, is an interesting account of the last few days of his life, volume 4. So it must be a set. Let's see if I can find those. They might be interested in reading. His kingdom was divided among the generals. He had reigned 12 and 2/3 years, and he left no heir. And I don't really know. Sometimes I think about the wheels that we leave. People don't sometimes don't have a wheel, and therefore it causes a lot of problems. And I don't know if it would have mattered back here because, say for instance, he had 10 boys out there, and the first one's going to become the heir, and the number 10 may kill all 9 of them. You know, his reputed son Hercules Hercules had been slain sometime before, and so the empire was held in trust by his generals for an unborn son by Roxana. So here goes the idea that I was talking about. One of the successors, that is Cassandra, murdered Roxana and her son. And so the kingdom was divided into 4 parts among his generals. Namely, Antigonus occupied the country from the Mediterranean into the Central Asia. At the end of this chapter, this unit, we're going to have a map. Mine's colored. I don't know if yours is colored, but mine's colored. but Cassandra ruled Macedonia. Ptolemy Lega ruled Egypt and southern Syria, and Lysimachus ruled Thrace. And turned to Daniel chapter 8, and I didn't have that highlighted, so I haven't turned there. And we're going to turn there when I highlight it. Okay, I highlight it. Okay, to turn over to Daniel chapter 8. Would have had mine ready if I'd highlighted, but I don't. In chapter 8, verse 5 through 8. It says there, and we know that Daniel's the great horn was broken. And notice it says, as I was considering, behold, and he goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. He came to the realm and that had two horns, which I had been standing before the river, and ran unto him in fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the realm, and he was moved, that's anger, against him, and smote the ram and break his two horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. For it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of the heaven. And so that's the whole idea in reference to what we're talking about, in reference to the successors to that of the kingdom. And so this helps us to understand the book of Daniel by looking at the inner period. But some broad features of the time were as follows. Number one, the return from Babylon was only partial, it had not completed. And so a greater Palestine was being built up outside the Holy Land. And so, but another greater Palestine was now being built by Alexandria. It was in the city of Alexandria, and Alexander chose Rokotis as the site of the metropolis of the Mediterranean world, for the perpetuations of his fame and name. The engineers constructed such a harbor as the world had never seen. Sometimes I'm just amazed when I go back and look at some of the pictures that some of the things that they made, and the bridge fell down at 285. Can you imagine that? And look at all the equipment that we had. And they finally got it built. Well, these people here didn't have all the equipment that we have today. So it took them some time to do this kind of work in a harbor. But Alexander settled many of the Jews in Alexandria because of their enduring qualities, and the colony of Jews increased through continued immigration. And so, in the course of time, and again, make the point in reference to that. This was also in the plan of God because the Jews had to be scattered, so they would actually, make up the synagogues and places like that, so the gospel would be taught. And so we will, if we get over to it tonight, we will go over to Acts chapter 2 and look at all the different nations, and kind of remember somewhat we are reading here between the testaments. So it was he converted Alexandria into what was largely a Jewish city, and two out of the five quarters were wholly Jewish. And so here the Jews established a synagogue and schools. And so in those schools now they taught the Old Testament law of Moses, and also the patriarchal age. They talked about the like Genesis and the book of Job. And so they taught about the fathers, and so on, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That was good, but also that's where a lot of opinions began to come out also in reference to the writings, or incorporating their writings, their traditions, and within the books of the Bible that they had, and so forth, the Torah and so on. They would have their own interpretations, and so they would put those, like some people have Bibles with notes in them, and they're good, but we have to realize they're written by men. Jerusalem was transplanted into Egyptian soil. And so throughout Egypt and all along the coast of North Africa, similar communities were established. So again, it's a fulfillment. Over in the book and in Isaiah, And in Isaiah chapter 19 and in verse 19, Isaiah prophesies about some things, and he points out, he says, in that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt. And so we're going to go and read from Josephus. Now, I didn't put Josephus here, but if you'll, I'm going to look it up, and if you'll give me time, I'm going to place it in there so that when I send the notes next week, you'll have that also. But it says, in a pillar at the border to the Lord. And so it's very interesting to realize that this had taken place. Now, in chapter, let's see here, in chapter 13 or book 13, you will have, well, I put the wrong thing, to look up this on my program for that has it. Um, well, mine says book 13. Okay, I got book 13. But what chapter 3, chapter 3. Let's see if that's going to be right. Get right, Bobby. You have to do things a certain way to get a search on Antiquities, chapter 13. Of chapter 13 section. They don't have a section. That's what's missing. Well, let's see what happens. Okay, an altar and so forth, were a temple to the Lord was built in Egypt. Uh, so I'll have to also search that out to make sure that we can find. It's going to be too much of a find, so I'll try it during the break. I've got it right here, and I'll try to go back and see where that is that he actually does that, because he didn't give a section in that. And there's 5 sections, and I'm not going to copy all 5 sections. But the thing is that they were bringing in things in which they should not have, and so. But we find that that was a fulfillment of a prophecy that they would have, that of an altar, and so forth, in that of Egypt. So I wanted to read the whole thing. So I really messed up because I didn't jot down the section that it's in. Let's see if it's in 4 or 5. Well, I'll tell you what. Maybe I'll just read the whole thing there. They're not. Huh. Okay, I can't find it, so we'll just go on, and I'll try to put that in. I got to find the section. But the influence of this movement led to the translation of the scriptures, and that will be the Septuagint. We'll talk some about that. And also, we would find that further all over Asia Minor and Syria, the Jews had their colonies and there. And again, we were to go over to Acts chapter 2, we would notice, and I'm going to read from the King James, Acts chapter 2, and we're going to go down to verse 8, if I'm not mistaken. And this comes up again later. It goes to 8 to chapter 11, verse 11. And I'll put that in these notes, but it comes up again because I put it in twice. And it goes again in verse 8. It says, "And how hear we every man in our own tongue, wherein we were born." Now, notice that where we were born, wherein we were born. So again, when you look at that Parthians, so that was their tongue. In other words, it was a dialect. and the Medes and the Elamites and the dwellers in Mesopotamia and Judea and Cappadocia and Pontus and Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia and Egypt and parts of Libya about Cyrene and strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes, Cretes and Arabians. We do hear them speak in the wonderful works of God. Now, the point being there is that we have looked at a lot of those places where that Alexander and others have captured, and we've read about them. And now, because of everything that happened in Babylon, and now they're going to be scattered abroad, and so we see that taking place. So wherever they went, uh, they went. They carried their scripture with them, and so you would have that of the Hebrew scripture. But since this is later than in 300 BC, then around 285, I think it was, they translated the scriptures into that of Greek. They would have the Hebrew. Now they would be carrying the Greek with them because that was a common language. And so there are people who speak not too highly in reference to the Septuagint, but it is a Greek translation. But wherever they went, they carried their scripture with them. Throughout Alexander's empire, Moses had them preach him. So you'll recall that when you read the New Testament, that Paul talks about how that he was one who obeyed the Old Testament, and that's what he had heard, and that's what he had been taught all of his life. But because of the change of the priesthood and so forth, everything had to change. So the influence of Greece in culture upon the Hebrews was tremendous. And we see that, especially, I think every time I think about the Greek culture and so forth, I think about the Corinthians. Like, I don't know why. Maybe I ought to think about the Romans, also Romans chapter 1, beginning verse 18. But I always think about the Corinthians and all the problems that they faced. But both were, when we stop and think about it, with the advent of Alexander the Great, the Greek culture and the Jewish revelation met. And when you stop and think about, yes, they met, it was mixed up. They were living, the Jews were living in that of the Greek culture and everything. And yet we find that Jesus Christ comes, and then we have those who leave the Greek culture and the Jewish revelation, as we would say, and obey the gospel. And now they're the church at Rome, the church at Corinth, the church at Thessalonica, and so forth. So you can just imagine it was a mixture. And I think it's great today when we look that in our congregation that we have white folks and we have brown folks and we have black folks and we have some from Panama and some from Spain and trying to think I don't know where else some of them are from. But I was just amazed when you stop and look, and sometimes it's hard. I remember one of our members, we got to talk about the first day of the week. She says, well, my country is not taking the Lord's Supper today. I said, ooh. And she says, no, they took it yesterday because they were behind us in time. See, you never thought about that. But that's the way that it goes. But the Greeks, or Greeks for the first time, had become cognizant of the Hebrews. And so the Greeks learned that the Hebrews possessed treasures of poetry and literature, and comparable, in fact, more than comparable to their own. They had a lot, the Greeks did. They further learned that fidelity to a treaty has ever been an honorable tradition among the Jews. In other words, they want to live according to what they agree to. And you notice today, that's one reason why I think that they can't get a treaty over there without all those people is because of they know that the Jews are going to live up to whatever they agree to. And if you break it, then they're going to respond. That's just the way they are. But we see that here. Alexander was most favorable impressed with the Hebrews and declared that he would never permit Jerusalem to be touched nor the temple polluted. Now, that's good of him, and we've talked about that before, but we would find that would be the case as long as Alexander lived, but after he died, that wasn't the case. There was, though, an influence of Greek ideas and customs and worship in Palestine. Now, that being true in reference to that, then there would be problems. Now, again, notice ideas and customs. The Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 talks about long hair, short hair, a man having short hair, and having hair on his head, and not that, things like that about a covering. His head's not to be covered when we pray, which we continue today to do that. When we have a hat on, somebody prays, we take our hat off. And also that women were not supposed to cut their hair and so forth. The Greek people had a number of customs And therefore the church at Corinth was made up of a lot of customs. And yet, if you go back, then that was a problem. And so, biblical conditions, we find the Greeks' sympathies as the passport to favors, that is, the fascination of Greek art and literature. These all united as a force to break through the crust of the national Jerusalem. Now, we find that Grecism, and I don't really know if that's a word or not, but that was in the notes. I noticed a different spelling of a lot of words, so I've changed some of them, but some of them I haven't. But Grecism, that is issues of that of Greece poured into Palestine through many open channels. And again, where Greece is located and so forth. And there was a lot of going and a coming there. And so there are many ways. The liberalism of the day more and more sympathized with Greek culture and learning and with the Grecian way of life. And you can see now a very strict Jewish life going on in the same place, that of this great liberalism of that of Greek culture. On the other hand, the conservatism of the day more and more constantly resolved itself in a spirit of fanaticism, even to the point that it would fight against truth if it came under Greek guise. And so you can notice, again, if that same type of attitude in reference to the Jewish way, in reference to wanting to hold on to some of their traditions, and also the Greeks wanting to hold on to some of their traditions and their culture and so forth. But the point is, if it is a violation of what the Word of God says, then a Christian was not supposed to be involved. And the same would be true if you go all the way back to the Old Testament, because of some of the things that the Greeks did, the Jewish people could not, take part in. It's just like we have those chapters in the book of Romans and Corinthians that deal with the meats. The Greek people would go out and buy the meats that's offered upon an altar and eat it, and the Jews goes, "Oh, you can't do that." So in these antipodes, liberalism versus conservatism were the progenitors of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And so, from a standpoint of that of the Jews, one set was liberal and one set was that of conservative. The Pharisees were very strict with that of the law. And the Sadducees were, they didn't believe in angels, they didn't believe in spirits, and so forth. They didn't believe in the resurrection. So that was a big problem among that of the Jewish people, but also you had the same problem upon that of the culture of that of the Greek people. Also, they all didn't agree either about some of the things they worship. So the next generation or so, these two elements were drawn off into two hostile camps, mutually hating and both hateful. They just hateful people. I mean, reference. And that thing is, as we're going to see when we get in talking about them, is that Sadducees actually take over the priesthood in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And in one of our classes at Carsville Congregation, we were talking about Hebrews, and we've seen that there was a necessity to change the priesthood of the Old Testament. The point being is that the high priest of the Jewish people was supposed to be from that of the line of the Levites, and we would find that most likely that would not be the case because of what takes place between the testaments. But for the present conservatives, they called themselves the Chasten or the godly party. So the liberals call themselves lovers of wisdom, or as we would say, the sophist. Sophia, Sophia means wisdom. And so there's a map in the notes there. And if you can look at that, you can see the distribution of the Greek dialects in the classical period. You just look at there, all those people, the different colors. You just notice one color there, not like being colorblind. I don't know what Macedonia and Thracian and Lydian and Carian. I don't know what color that is. It looks tan to me. I don't know what color. Then you can see there's the difference in the colors there of where Delphi and Lucas. Notice a little island of Lucas. It's a different color, and also the Corcyra, they're different colors just all by themselves out there. If you drop down, you can see also Achaia and Olympia and I won't say Corinth and all right in there. You find the Olympia's a different color, and also trying to find some of the Laconia down in the lower part there. And then going up Delphi, then you have Thebes. Notice Thebes there, then Boetai, they're a completely different color. Then you have Athens down there, it's a different color. And then you have Euboea, I think that's the way you say it. Out in the water there, you have Andros. And then there's an island down there, Thera, a little few islands at the very bottom there. It looks like they're go all the way across to Miletus there. That they're the same color. Rhodes, is that all the same color? Like I said, I'm colorblind, so that looks like all the same color to me. Then you have Miletus and Ephesus, and you see how far they are. Remember, Paul called the elders from Ephesus down to Miletus. And so you have them down on up there. You have Smyrna, Pergama, and so forth. And so you have the different ones. What color in the very top up there? What color is that matched up with? Very top right. Is that the same thing as Rhodes down there?
No, it's a yellow, Bobby.
At the very top right corner?
Yep, the top right corner.
Yeah, you go up
where Smyrna and all that is?
Carian, Lydian, right above the white?
Yes.
What color is that?
It's a the Lydian and Carian is a
another one right up in the corner.
Smyrna and that?
Yeah, it doesn't have any name on it. You have the white, you have the C there.
Okay, it's a purple.
Back up in the right-hand corner, very top.
Yeah.
What color is that?
Oh, it's a cream color.
Is it the same thing as Rhodes? Well, anyway, I have across the top Illyrian, Macedonia, Thracian. You see Thracian? Go all the way to the end of Thracian and right there at the top. What color is that?
Okay, that's a brown color.
All right, does it match Rhodes down here?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I
think
thought.
They're the same color. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Also, now look, there's Crete also, and it's a different color. I mean, it's the same color as Rhodes.
Yes.
Now there at Cyprus, and I think Cyprus, they're not the same as you look over there in Olympia, Argos.
Yes.
Is that the same
little
color?
Circle in there is green. It's the same color green.
Oh, okay. Well, being colorblind, you can see the colors when you look at them like that. I can see they're the same, but but I can't tell you what they are. Okay, so that's a kind of a map of what's taking place. Now, Unit 5 of our study, that Brother Rex Turner Sr. Called it Unit 5. He points out to us that now that we're going to have a historical survey of the Hebrew people from the beginning of the Grecian period until the rise of the Roman period. Now, again, some of this stuff is repeated. Last week, after I got off, I went all the way back. I said, looks like I talked about all those things, but I have to, when I type this, I read it. And so, and so maybe that's where I come up with that idea that I was actually going over some of the same stuff, but that wasn't the case. It is different. But first, we take a look at the Greek city-states during the period of 536 BC to 332 BC. So we backed up now to that map that we looked at. So here is the Greek dialects during the classical period. These are some of the city-states that we will see and hear about as we go through. That's the reason I put the map in there, because I was trying to find a city states map, and there's nothing there. This one here is called the distribution of Greek dialects, and it actually shows some of those cities that we're going to talk about and how that they are actually conquered. So Persia never was able to conquer this Greek city-states. So the Greek colonies on the shore of Asia Minor, called the Ionians, they were at one time under Persian rule, but in time revolted and they joined with the mother country. Now Darius, Darius Histippus, what do you say? I can't say his name. Hastapes, I can't say what you said. He reigned from 521 BC to I got 4 something other there, and I don't know what that is because it's 496 is what it is. 496. supposed to be, we find that in 492 BC, he mustered a gigantic force by land and sea to subdue both of the colonies and the mother country of Greece. So Darius was defeated both on land and on sea, and on they revolt in Egypt, and later his death prevented Darius from prosecuting further war against that of Greece. Xerxes, 486 BC to 465 BC, we find that he invaded Greece for more than 5 million, with more than 5 million Persians. And the Persian army was opposed and defeated at Thermopylae by the Leonidas. And the Persian fleet was defeated by the Greeks at Salamis under the celebrated Thermostocles. And Xerxes returned to Persia, leaving his general Mardonius behind. And the general fared no better. In other words, he wasn't successful too either. And so in one day, the Persians, they were defeated by land at Plataea and in Bogota, Bolatia, and by the sea at Micah in Asia. And so from that time on, no person ever invaded the Hellespont, the ancient name of the Dardanians, so called from Helle, the daughter of Athamas, who was drowned there. So the Hellespont was composed of these Greek city-states. And so the Greek peninsula, broken by mountains and valleys, had a long indented coastline. Now let's see if we go back to the map. You can see that down through there, how indented it is in reference to that they were having to take. There was a long area there. Go back and look. And so the topography played a large part in the development of the Greek, separated from its neighbors by mountains, and each community, however, would they become a separate political unit, and the city, a center of government and trade, together with the surrounding countryside, constituted a city-state. And so coastline favored the growth of maritime trade, especially with the Phoenicians. And so you look there and you can see some of the city-states. I'm going to go back because I wanted to see exactly where, when we look at that, Laconia right there is on that strait right there. Sparta, if you know, go back. Sparta is one of those that we'll talk about some more. But you see some of those Arcania, Atolia, Achaia, Arcadia, Messenia, Laconia, Argolis, Athens, Attica, Boeotia, Euboea, Epirus, and Thessaly. You see all of them there, and I don't have them all. That's why usually you put an ETC there. But the political structure of the Greek city-states was undergoing changes during the 2 centuries of Persian supremacy. Now, again, that would be, if you stop and look at it, he says the political structure, and because a lot of times these places would make up their own rules and regulations that one could, in case he wants to be, run for a county seat or something of that sort, whatever they may call it. But in the city, the political life of a community was centered, number one, here the citizens from the countryside met. And number two, here's was the marketplace. So, people would come into that area. And then here was the shops of the craftsmen, and therefore that would be the selling that would take place. And so that's not Sears and Roebuck when we think about craftsmen there. Here were the walls for defense also. So here were the government buildings and the temples. So they were all kind of like, as we would stop and think about that, and we look, the citizens from the countryside met, and that used to be true in a lot of places where there were, you had a big farm and so forth, and all the people would meet, or A lot of people had meeting places where they would go, a community building, and they would go to that. And also the cities, the citizens from the countryside, they met, also. And so, especially the marketplace and the shops. And so, but also they had those walls built for their defense, but also they would have to do government business because they had taxes, and they also would worship their temples and so forth. So in these cities, like in Ephesus, if you stop and think about it, you remember Paul in Acts chapter 19. I mean, Act 19, he got into trouble because he was preaching Jesus Christ, and people were not buying the things that they would offer to their idols. And so those people who made those were pretty upset. And so the great landowners, the king's counselors in the prior Homeric age, assumed increasing power at the expense of the monarch. So monarchy was thus followed by oligarchy. And so in most cities, the king retained only his religious functions. And so the right to vote was confirmed to citizens with a certain amount of landed property, that is, where people can land and so forth. And so you see there that not everybody had the right to vote. Just like here in America, not everybody had the right to vote. Eventually, that changed. And so everybody gets to vote at a certain age. And there's laws in reference to that. The right to hold office was limited to members of a few families or at the most wealthiest citizens. And so we have citizens that goes into they may be high middle class, but when they come out, they're the wealthiest citizens. The age qualifications further restricted the number of eligible magistrates, and so power was concentrated in the hands of a few people. And in time, in many citizens of Greece, especially those near the coast, the oligarchies, they were threatened by the growing demands of the rest of the citizens for a voice in government. So there's always some type of improvement that everybody wanted to be made. And so as they would grow and they become more and more of them, then they would try to get things changed. The small landholder resented the rule of their creditors. And so you can understand that because of the taxes and things of that sort. Those who derive wealth from commerce and industry, the industry demanded the revision of property qualifications. And that was just only right since, they had given them certain freedoms, so they wanted more freedoms. And the same was with us also. We wanted to be free from England and France and other places. So leaders arose who offered to fulfill these demands in return for popular support in disposing of ruling families. So the oligarchy gave way to tyranny. So tyranny in turn paved way for democracy. Now, we are not a democracy in the United States. We are we're not a democracy. We are what are we? There's another
I
word.
heard we are a welfare state.
Welfare. We call ourselves starts not well anyway. Maybe I come to the in order to maintain power, the tyrants republic. We are a republic. In order to maintain power, the tyrants were compelled to make concessions to the people. And so in time, Athens developed a pure democracy. Now, you have to remember about Athens. It's filled with that of the culture, of that of the Gentiles, but also they were Jewish people there. And so that's what happens. And so we would find that it comes that you start out with little freedoms to do this, and eventually, there's more and more demand for that of freedoms and more for democracy. So therefore, that's what happens. Grecian city-states were making strides in literature and sculpture and base painting, and on you could go in reference to what they were doing and in reference to within that. And so they sold those things, and yet some of them were things that would be sold because of worship. The Grecian city-states were producing some of the world's outstanding philosophers and scientists. And so we find that Thales, a Greek philosopher and scientist of Miletus, was one of the 7 wise men of Greece. And he was there from 640 BC until that of 540 BC. And so you can look and you can see where that of Thebes was, and we had a lot to say about Thebes, and also we made reference to his being about uh, uh, Letus. I mean, I said talked about Thales also when we talked about places or the philosophers that we talked about. He was recognized as the founder of Greek geometry, Greek astronomy, and Greek philosophy. And he gained fame in his own day by predicting an eclipse of the sun for May the 28th, 585 BC. So Thales lived during the time that Cyprus ruled the Persian throne. And so Pythagoras, 530 BC, of Crotona, was a Greek philosopher and mathematician. And so he traveled blindly in search of wisdom. He associated to himself disciples who were devoted reformationists of political and moral and social life. In other words, they're going to reform every bit of that. And so then we can stop for a moment and think about Catholicism. And you find that because of what Catholicism became, that there are those people who came out and says, we want to reform Catholicism, but that led to Protestantism. Years ago. And so that led also to a reformation among that of each people. But yet we needed a restoration to go all the way back to that of the cross, is the restore of the New Testament church. So we can see what's going on among that of people. He is credited with the discovery that the earth is a sphere. And so he also lived during the time that Cyprus was king of Persia. Then we talked some about Socrates, 470 BC, 339 BC, that he that of Athens. He was from that of Athens, and he was a Greek philosopher. And so, being that of a Greek philosopher, he would have that of students also, which we're going to see in reference to that of Aristotle, Plato, I'm sorry, Plato. And so he developed the Socratic method, or as we would call the inquiry and instruction form of philosophy. So his philosophy is known through the writings of that of Plato, more so than that of Socrates. Now, we've all heard in reference about Socrates. His doctrines are the basic idealistic philosophy and have profoundly influenced philosophical thought through succeeding centuries. He lived during that Artaxerxes Longomanus and Darius II, respectively, were kings in Persia. And so Plato is the next one in reference to them. That he was of Athens also, and we find that he was a Greek philosopher, ardent disciple of that of Socrates. He stayed in Athens and until Socrates' first his death, and we find that Socrates' death, that should be a what you call it there, that he's get it right. Finally, Socrates until Socrates' death. So he died again in 437 BC. Then he traveled in Egypt, and or he did. He died in 399. Socrates did. Then he traveled in Egypt and Cyrene and Cilicia and Magna Graecia. And you notice again, if we were to go back to that map of ours, we would see some of those places. He returned to Athens in 387 BC, and there founded his school of philosophy known as the Academy. And this academy was later endowed and became, in form, a university. It's actually the first university in history. He was the author of a number of works, which was his in the Republic, and we would find that and laws, his Republic and Laws and Apology were achieved. And so Plato was contemporary with the second period, or the last 70 years of the Persian Empire. And then we had the great one, as I would say, great one, and it would be that of Aristotle. Most people read and study logic. They read and study about Aristotle. And I have some books over here that, in reference to logic, and they bring up a lot of things in reference to him. But Aristotle, 384 BC, 322 BC of Stagira, as a Greek philosopher. He studied under a Plato, and so when you stop, go back, we go back generations. There's Socrates, there's Plato, and then there's Aristotle. And so if you were to be reading Socrates, and then all of a sudden you jump to read Aristotle, you may find some Socrates there. Better developed, maybe in reference to that of Plato. But he studied under Plato at the academy in Athens, and he tutored Alexander the Great. Right? We brought up when we studied about Alexander the Great. He taught in Athens, and as the head of the Peripatetic school, he became famous for his works in logic, metaphysics, natural science, ethics, politics, rhetoric, and poetics. So you notice there that he was famous for all of those. And Aristotle was contemporary time with the second period, or the last 70 years of the Persian Empire. So you had the rise of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was the son of Philip, king of Macedonia. And again, we find that when we look at Philip, that he was there 332 BC, and between that of 336 BC, and succeeded to the throne of Macedonia in 359 BC. And when Thebes was, and again to the map, if you were to go there, when Thebes was a great power in Greece, several Macedonian nobles were taken there as hostages. Philip, he was heir to the throne in Macedonia, was one of the number that was heired. When Philip became king in 359 BC, he found his country's set by the dangers of the side on every side. And so by 356 BC, we find that he quelled the majority of his former foes. And so he built the strongest army in the world. He relied on only on soldiers recruited on a voluntary system. In other words, they weren't jerked up and said, "You're a soldier," or drafted, as we would call it, or forced. He constructed a force of 40,000 men who were severely disciplined, trained to march long distance in full equipment, carrying their baggage and full food sufficient for 3 days. I don't know how they did it, but I humped the Vietnam, but all that kind of stuff. But I didn't carry 3 days of food. um, Although Persia made, when you think about Persia was a constant threat in Philip's day, although Persia made no further invasions except to those which references have been made, it remained a constant threat to the Greek city-states. And in addition to the Persia threat, by its position alone, Persia bribed and otherwise included some of the larger city-states to take up arms on the side of the Persian Empire. And so you would have some of those people that would take him up on that. And that's because he became, as we said already, had the biggest army in the world. And so I get this long word right, the Peloponnesians, that would have been Polynesians, I can say that word. They had a league established in the 6th century and was constituted of certain autonomous city-states. And when you stop and think about that, then so you had them, and they were of Peloponnese, and included in that of Corinth and Megara and Sparta. Now you'll see those in that map again, and they're going to come up because in 457 BC, well, first of all, Corinth resented the encroachment of the Athenians upon its established trade with the West. And in 457 BC, Athens besieged Agena, Corinth's ally, and the fall of that city called Sparta to bring the forces of the Peloponnesian League against Athens. So Persia gave Sparta, and again, assistance during this Peloponnesian war. And so we've known that, noticed some of that, but later Sparta and Persia were engaged for 14 years in conflict over the Ionian cities, which Persia expected to receive in return for the assistance she had given Sparta during the Peloponnesian War. So through that of bribery and other circumstances, Persia forced upon Greece in 336 BC a humiliating peace. So she acquired control over the Greek cities on the Asiatic coast. Also gained the right to interfere in the affairs of the Greek communities. So the present problem now of large was the actually need for that of unity. So here it is, they've absorbed in all these different areas, these city states and so forth. And so they absorbed the attention of the Grecian philosophers, particularly Plato and uh, Socrates. I got that misspelled there. Socrates. And so, no, I did that before when we talked about him. It is Socrates, 436 BC to that of 338 BC. And so he was an Athenian orator. He was that, and he was also, as we would simply say, something wrong there, an orator and a rhetorician. Rhetorician, rhetorical. I can say rhetorical. So he was was the founder of 392 B6 and the head of a school in Athens. And Isocrates urged that Greece represent the highest civilization in the world. And so he affirmed, therefore, that the city-states should cease to fight each other. So here's this idea. He's going to be the one, as we said before, that's going to unite them. He says, you need to quit all this fighting one another. So he declared that if the Grecian city-states were united in a common aim, they could meet the recruiting menace of Persian invasion. Now, Isocrates, in his looking about or around for a great Greek leader, he decided that the suitable man was Philip, that is the king of Macedonia. So according to Isocrates, Philip combined the high qualities and both that of state and statesman. And Isocrates wrote several letters to Philip, explaining the urgent need for the unification of all the Greek cities. And as a lover of Athens, he begged Philip to be friendly with that great city. Now, he believed that such an arrangement could extend Greek culture all over the world. Now, again, I stop and bring up the eternal plan that God had, that in reference to that of the coming of our Lord. And so if they extended all of that throughout all the world, then we would find that also they would carry the Jewish people with them, and therefore the Jewish schools, the Jewish synagogues, etc. Now, the Demosthenes, the famous Athenian orator, disdained Macedonia as barbaric and repudiated the subject. In other words, he didn't want to have anything to do with them. And so Persia placed bribes and spread propaganda in suitable quarter so that a tense situation arose between Macedonia and that of Greece. And so that's what happened. And in that of happening in reference to that we would find that this Macedonia and Greece, there was this tension among them. The word Macedonia there is misspelled. So the war ensued, and in 333 BC, The Battle of Chaeronea made Philip master of Greece. With Philip as head, the Greek city-states became united under a treaty known as the League Corinth. So when we talk about leagues, that's what it is. They have a treaty. And remember that if you made a treaty with that of the Jewish people, then they would not do anything. They would just until if you broke the treaty, you know. And so only Sparta stood out for independence. They were the only one. Everything else had been brought together. So Isocrates praised Philip because by treating his foes with generosity, he gained their cooperation, a more fruitful method than the destruction of their cities. So Philip married Olympias, uh, the sister of King Epirus. From their union, Alexander was born in 356 BC. So it brings us to him. And that's the observation of the survey that we want to get to is him. The following year, Cleopatra, a daughter, was born. Philip could trace his descent from Hercules, and Olympias was a direct in a direct line um, from Achilles. Achilles. I guess that might be a K. Achilles. She is said to have followed the cult of Dionysus, which prevailed in her country, and so idolatry. And so there were rumors, though, to the effect that Olympias roamed the woods at night, joining the wild songs and dances indulged by the Dionysus when his rights were due. And so Olympias was impulsive, independent, and very outspoken. Olympias suffered much from that of Philip's frequent martial infidelities and his habits of overdrinking, which many in part explained or excused some of his unrestrained actions. And yet, Alexander was devoted to his mother, but we would find that he never left her take any part in political affairs. So eventually, and as we talk about some of this stuff before, Philip divorces that of Olympias and marries Cleopatra, the beautiful young niece of Attalus, one of the Philip's generals. And Philip was actually assassinated by Paulus, a youth of good birth. Paulus had been insulted in public at Attalus, one of Philip's Attalus, one of Philip's generals. He had asked Philip to obtain satisfaction for his rude conduct, and Philip tried to appease the youth by giving him a gift and retaining him in his personal service. But Paulus, seeing that he would obtain no retribution, Attalus, being the uncle of Philip's second wife, brooded and urged his grievances and sought the advice of a sophist. Now, that is the godly part. That is the people, not the godly part, but those people in reference to wisdom. They were a group of wisdom people. They're wise. So the sophists giddily informed him that he would gain glory if he attacked some prominent man. And they were said to be wise. And so at the wedding of Philip's daughters, Cleopatra, and while Philip was walking along at the head of the procession, Paulus rushed from the crowd of spectators and killed the king with his point. And so, that's the way that, again, the way that things had happened. So we're going to take a break, and then we'll take 15 minutes, and then we'll come back. And I want to do something while we're going away there. And so let me move on to. All right, we're back on. Okay. What I did went back and checked over because a lot of the information we gave is something we gave back in lesson number 3. I was wondering, if maybe I copied something over, but it's a different theme in reference to what we did before. Let's see, historical survey of the Hebrew people from the beginning of the Grecian period until the rise of the Roman Empire. And then if you go back up to lesson number 3, I think it was number 3. The historical survey of the Hebrew people from the rise of Alexander. That's what I was just saying. I don't know what I've done. Going up to the other one. Well, anyway, that was, find it right now where I was looking at a while ago. What page you on?
I'm looking at page 132.
Yeah, there's a lot of repeat of it, so that's the reason why I guess it. I guess you need to repeat all this stuff. Oh me, all right. We find that, as you said, 132. I got Alexander the Great received an inviolable education. Is that what you got?
What page is that?
Oh, my page is 130.
Oh, okay.
Alexander received his first education in association with of other youths. Talking about Alexander the Great received an education uh, from use of a noble birth from
Okay. Okay.
Leonidas, relative of his mother, and then Alexander proved to be really readily persuaded, but impossible to drive. He was approachable when given a reason which he could understand. And Aristobulus, the Greek architect who accompanied him throughout the campaigns in Asia, mentioned this quality or characteristic of that of Alexander. Now, Alexander reached puberty. Philip was, when he did, Philip was so impressed by his ability that he decided the son must have the best education possible. And so he selected Aristotle, the Greek philosopher who we just read about. At the time, was attracting attention by his wise methods of instruction. So at about 15, Alexander was sent to um, where Aristotle had his school, Cilicia. Just fixed that, and I knew the place. 15. That's where we're talking about it at 15. I got 13, 15. Okay. He was sent. Well, where Aristotle had his school, and there he remained there until he was 17. But Alexander was a student of Aristotle from 342 BC until 335 BC. And I messed that up. So when we think about him, what his education, he is getting the best education that a person could get at that time. And so it was later in 335 BC to 322 BC that Aristotle was head of the Peripatetic school at Athens. And so Aristotle gave Alexandra much advice concerning the duties of kings, and he encouraged him to follow his father's projects in Asia. When Alexander was 14, Isocrates wrote to him to tell him how delighted he was to hear the excellent reports of his love and his good literature and his associates with high character and intellect. So he added that if Alexander continued on such lines, he would become outstanding as his father. And so until the early death of Alexander, the master and pupil maintained a friendly intercourse, corresponding regularly during Alexander's 11 years in the East. But at 16, Alexander was entrusted with the government of Thrace and Macedonia during the absence of his father. At 18, he managed to the left arm of the army of the Battle of Chaeronea He was so successful that after the contest, Philip embraced him and declared that he would not be able to leave to his son a kingdom extensively enough for his exceptional gifts. So Alexander the Great succeeded to the throne of the death of his fathers. And so Philip was assassinated 336 BC, just as he was beginning his preparation to invade the invasion of Persia. So the ascension of Alexander to the throne of the death of his father was disputed. So Philip's second wife had a born child, and many Macedonians considered that this infant was a legal future sovereign. So rumors spread that Olympias was so unrestrained to the second marriage that she was involved in a plot which would lead to the murder of Philip. So Olympias had tried to induce Paris to revolt against Alexander, but Alexander countered the move when he gave his daughter to the wife of that of King Epirus. So later, Olympias brought about the death of Cleopatra, the widow of Philip, and his infant son in order to prevent any further claim to the throne. And so Alexander remonstrated with his mother, but later he was to realize that her impetuous actions had removed further trouble. Attalus, one of Philip's generals, claimed that his niece Cleopatra had the prior right to throne because she was a Macedonian. And so he urged that he should act as regent until her infant son became mature. So Attalus was at that time in Asia Minor in an attempt to gain over the Greek coastal town. Attalus was accused of treason and he was executed. So too late, it was discovered that he had not been disloyal. So the Lincestian brothers, said that they had a right to the crown because their family had formerly possessed that of Macedonia. So therefore, by right of possession, they should be the next. But the promise to restore the old customs of the country and to protect the people from becoming, you know, becoming involved in that of fruitless wars with that Persian. So there was a problem with all of that. And so their claim was denied when information was offered which proved that they had accepted money from the king of Persia. So the sympathies of the people were really with Alexander. So Alexander refused, as some of his as some of his friends advised to come to terms with its claimants to the crown. He acted in promptness, and all who were incriminated in the assassination of Philip was dealt with severely. And so Philip's death had caused consternation throughout the country. So Greece claimed independence with the League of Corinth, again, the treaties of that group of people. So Demosthenes delivered orations, and I can't even say the word, orations incited Athens and other Greek cities to break their agreement with the League of Corinth. And so he claimed that the treaty announced no city did any leader except Philip. And so he further asked who could believe in the ability of the new king of Macedonia, untried, unknown, and only a boy of 20. So Alexander realized that he was in a peril on every side. The unsubdued northern tribes from Greece itself and from Asia. And so he considered that his most important task was to consolidate his position and with that of as head of the head of that of Corinth. And so we find that trying to find something there, head of the League of Corinth. So he lost no time in starting out for Thessaly. As it failed, and so let's see if it spells up right. I can get it hit there. Aware that that